of us in the room are all going to be learning together and learning a lot about, I think, how resources have traditionally flowed into work around the environment, and particularly around environmental justice, or in some cases not flowed, and what new ways in which we can make decisions and ways in which we can distribute resources could look like that would truly shift the balance of power and begin to resource the work where it needs to be resourced in the communities. So we're glad you're here. I'm Jamie Baxter. I am a part-time director for the Chesapeake Bay Funders Network. We are a regional collaborative of environmental grant makers. And so by virtue of being a network, we ourselves do not actually make grants, but we work with 30 or 40 organizations of all different types and sizes who do make grants that are supporting a wide range of environmental issues throughout the Mid-Atlantic region. So many of the states that have been kind of part of the conversation in various parts of today's conference, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, the District of Columbia, West Virginia, Delaware, all of which are sort of part of the region for which our network of grant makers have programs that fund. Many of them fund at a very hyper-local community level. Some of them fund at a larger regional or even national level, and everything in between. And all of them, I think, would probably, if they were here today, would say probably have not been funding environmental justice communities as much as many of those communities would need, and as much as they probably would like to down the road. And that's partly what brings us here today, which is that we know that the philanthropic community has been part of the challenge facing environmental justice communities since the beginning of time and since the beginning of the movement. Knowing that is one thing, actually doing something to change that within the sort of philanthropic institution writ large is another. And so that is really what this conversation is about today. It's about what does it look like to cede power and to be part of a solution that ultimately builds power and reverses the injustice that has been impacting many communities in our region, and what is philanthropy's role in that. So we're very lucky to have some folks here who can share with us some examples of that in action. How does it actually work, and what does it do, and what have been some of the real highlights, and what are some of the pitfalls or challenges associated with really changing these systems? And also to hear about an exciting and potentially, I think, maybe not potential anymore, but a new fund being propped up in our region that will exist to help reverse some of the discriminatory practices in philanthropy that have existed for a long time. So with us to do that, we have Tamira Benitez, who's with the Diverse City Fund. We have Jennifer Lesser-Regol Ian with Mosaic Initiative, and Casey Wetzel with Chesapeake Bay Trust. Very happy to have them here. But before we sort of jump right to the panel, in the spirit of what has been a really engaging and energizing conference, I thought it would be great to hear maybe one or three examples from you all of ways in which philanthropy has discriminated or not shown up for you in the work that you do or the work that your organization does. Is anyone willing to kind of break the ice and get the discussion rolling and share those experiences? Go ahead.
So if there's a community member that would rather take the time first, I definitely would cede the time to them. I'm with the US EPA, and we have partnered with the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, and they are, as you probably know, one of 4 congressionally chartered foundations. So working in EPA, I would often hear from communities saying, these folks seem to fund the same folks year after year. And I'm really proud to say that EPA, I was in the Office of Water at that time, but the Office of Environmental Justice partnered with us. And the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation was open to this idea of examining their practices, which stunned me, by the way. But they actually heard all these suggestions from the Office of Environmental Justice. It was a really productive meeting, and they implemented a lot of these practices. Now, I don't have numbers to show what the results were, but I was really struck that they also assigned someone who was working for them, an intern that was working for them, to actually work on this project full time and implement these various practices. So that's a story that I'm sure is still ongoing. I'm sure it's not all done, but I wanted to open the door and hopefully other folks will follow.
Great. Go ahead.
Okay, great, thanks. Annette also with Resilient Virginia. So we had just finished earlier this year an EPA environmental justice grant working in Lynchburg, Virginia, and really had just year one though, and we put in another proposal, but it's like going to be months and months till we hear if we get it kind of thing. So in the interim, people asked us, well, when are we meeting again? And we had a great environmental justice consultant that we work with who happened to be from that community, which was fantastic, and we hired neighborhood ambassadors, and we had really in-depth community meetings and on. But it's the first little step there, and then you have to keep going. So there was an opportunity to apply for some funding from the Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay. And I think this group, but they're based in Maryland here. So we were going to do a little study on green solutions, green infrastructure, just to say, hopefully get a little more money in there in the interim to keep people talking to each other and, to talk about solutions. This was looking at stormwater flooding in their neighborhoods. Anyway, we didn't ask for much money, but we did not get it. And it was just like, wait, if you look at the record of where they're funding, they're mostly funding in Maryland. That's just, I hate to say, but there's to me, there's this thing where there's money going, to a lot in Maryland. But there's all kinds of communities in Virginia that could benefit by this. And we're one of the groups that are trying to open up those possibilities with these communities. And we're, a bit of a broker, let me just say, to working with underserved neighborhoods. But that would have been great just to give some continuity. So we're keeping fingers crossed that we'll get the next EPA grant. We don't know.
Thank you. All right. One more. We're going to have more discussion later, but one more to get us warmed up here.
All right. I'll be quick. I'm Robin Lewis. I'm the director for Interfaith Power and Light, director for climate equity. And previous to this, I was, working in EJ for over the decade. I had to scrape money together to live. I couldn't find funding from foundations or government before 2021. The money has opened up. I work primarily with the Black church, but I work with interfaith organizations, and now money's releasing. But believe me, it was tight. So I'm currently funded by the Equity Fund, which is a big fund. They're now starting to come out with EJ funding, and people like me who do outreach and education, but that wasn't funded before, but it's being funded now. But people don't know where to find it. So I'm here to help people lead them to who I went to, who's funding my salary. Praise God, because I needed to work. So I'm just saying it's better.
Oh, all right.
I want to say something.
We'll get back to you. I promise. We're going to get to our panelists.
I think I want to share about how positive our experience has been in terms of that funding. And so that's why I wanted to contribute something, if you don't mind.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm Ruby Stemley. I'm the founder of Eco Latinos, and we started in 2018. Nice meeting you in person. I felt that it's important for me to share with you that we were an organization. We started in 2018, and we started with no idea what we were going to do in terms of funding, but with a clear idea that what we wanted to do was to serve the Latino communities of the Chesapeake Bay region, which is, amplify the voices of Latinos through engagement, education, and advocacy. And these organizations that are here talking with us today funded us from the beginning when we had not much, but only an idea. And we've been funded. And because of that funding, we're making a difference. We started with, of course, thanks to their support, and we've been funded, and our community, and let's not talk about Ecolatinos, but the Latino community of the region is getting the benefit of those funding, and environmental justice is being, is happening because we're getting the support of the funders here. So I just felt, a moral obligation to share this with you because my experience is totally different from what you have been shared. I just want to share that.
Thank you, Remy. I was actually hoping that this would be a good venting session to talk about all the problems with philanthropy, but great to hear that there's actually some positive trends out there. So with that, knowing that there's plenty of criticism that can be thrown philanthropy's way when it comes to supporting this work, particularly at the community level, we want to see what it looks like to seed power in action. So I'm going to hand it over first to Tamira Benitez with Diverse City Fund to share their story and the work that they're doing, and then we'll move on to the Mosaic Initiative.
Thank you so much. And all of the things that you share are the reason why organizations like us exist. So as Jamie was saying, I'm Tamira Benitez, she, hers, they are my pronouns, and I am DC Fund's, Diversity Fund's first executive director. It's such an honor to be here with you today. In the next, maybe I'm going to try to reduce it down from 10 minutes to like maybe 7 minutes. I'm going to tell you about who we are. I'm going to introduce to you what participatory grant making is, and I'm going to give you a quick example of how we do participatory grant making at Diversity Fund. So before we get started, let me tell you about us. DC Fund, we are a community-led participatory grant maker, 100% participatory grant maker that we are dedicated to find and support groups that do racial and social justice in DC. We fund, support, and support efforts in Washington DC that are rooted in communities of color to realize liberation, spark solutions, and organize against oppression of all kinds, with the main purpose of doing systems change in Washington DC. Currently, we are, I mentioned that I'm the first executive director. We are defining and operationalizing what collective leadership means to us. So you see in there, we're 2 paid staff members that run this entire operation with the support of a volunteer, 15-member, very diverse staff. Since the very beginning in 2011, when we were funded, we have run 24 grant cycles, community-led grant cycles of grant making. We have funded over 660 groups that are doing racial justice work in Washington, D.C., and we have redistributed almost $3 million and counting. We are a small but very, very mighty organization that fundraises every single dollar that we redistribute to community. We fundraise it. Our money comes from donors. Our money comes from financial institutions that align with our values and with our work. Let's see. We have been doing 100% participatory grant making since the very beginning. What that means is that we have a separate group of folks, of community leaders that are made out of the grant making team that make decisions on our behalf. These are, like I said, community leaders of color. 100% are communities of color, community leaders, activists, that they make decisions, and once those decisions are made, we disperse the funds. All right. I'm probably going to ask you to get up your phone and go to QR codes and just give you tons of information that you can review later on, because this is a quick introduction on what participatory grant making is. I'm going to give it very simple to you. I'm going to define it very simple to you and just say that, let me first define what traditional grant making is, which I'm sure based on your descriptions, you all know what traditional grant making is. So since the 1600s, I'm not so good with history, but since the 1600s, grant making, philanthropy has always been in the hands of people that have the most resources. This could be family foundations, community foundations. It could be extremely wealthy individuals or individuals with wealth, federal, state, local governments, that they hold the money and they hold the decision-making power. They review applications, they make decisions on who should get the funding that is available to solve all of the issues, all the, the systemic issues, all of the intersectional issues that everyday folks are dealing with. Let's see. So we know that usually has been board members, families, space staff members that make those decisions, right? The likelihood of those individuals knowing deep down or knowing deeply how those issues affects communities, it's unlikely. It's absolutely unlikely, and that's when you see philanthropy spending tens of thousands of dollars in studies, et cetera, et cetera. When the easiest solutions is to go to the people most affected by the issues and say, you're experiencing the issues, you should come up with the solutions on how to address these issues, right? So participatory grant making, what it does is that it transfers the decision-making power to the people that are most affected by the issues, and it brings the experiences, the knowledge of those most affected by the problems, and they're the ones that determine the opportunities for the solutions that will address the root causes. It also promotes a deeper transparency, showing the deep inequality that happens when decisions about money are being made. So participatory grant making, what it does is diversifies who makes decisions about the resources that are needed to solve the issues and the diversity of the solutions to address those issues. The bottom line is that who makes the decisions absolutely matters. Absolutely matters. And participatory grant making, what it does is that it's a leveler to disrupt and democratize philanthropy. You can see a quote in there from one of the people that have been doing participatory grant making for a very long time. All right, so let me tell you quickly about DC Fund Story and how we do what we do. So, and you're gonna hear from me, and then you're gonna hear from another peer in participatory grant making. For the last 12 years, 13 years, we've done participatory grant making from the very beginning. And what we discovered and what we have witnessed and we have solid evidence is that the people that are most affected by the issues are the ones that should be making these decisions on redistribution of funds. For us, it makes absolutely change because while DC is one of the, like we say, that is one of the wealthiest cities in the region, we have a $19.7 billion budget, but still we see so much poverty in Washington, D.C. Obviously, there's an issue, right? And government and large philanthropy, they either are not interested or don't know the groups that are actually doing the work and the people and the solutions that need to take place. So traditional philanthropy is not seeing the work that is actually addressing the issues that we're seeing in the community. And the people closest to the issues, they are doing the work and they're paying out of pocket. They're paying, they're paying however is that they pay, and like in I imagine that in the Black community is the same, but in the brown community, we say we take it out from whatever it is that we need to take it out because it needs to get done, right? So DC, it totally makes sense for us to do community-led grant making because we have been the people of color, Black communities, brown communities, we have been disfranchised from the very beginning of funding DC, and we still are because we're not a state. In DC, the environment has always been is wealthy people, well-connected political people versus people that are grassroots, that are organizing, that are fighting against oppression. And it may absolutely make sense to us to give the grant making power to our communities, to our activist community, because they know what's going on the ground. They know what's happening. So we absolutely need to give them the grant making power. All right, I'm gonna give you super quick. I'm gonna go through these steps on how we do our grant making, but don't worry, that QR code can give you more information about like our grant making, all of that. What you need to know from DC Fund is that while we're a small, mighty organization, we distribute almost $750,000 each year. We do it in 2 rounds. We have our funding is absolutely unrestricted funding. We trust people to do what they need to do with the funding. We prioritize people that don't have access to traditional funding. Our grants are $5,000 for groups and $15,000 for organizations. All of these groups are doing systems change work, not just seeding power, but also creating the environment so that the decision making is transparent and accessible. Is something that we actually work really hard on doing. I mentioned folks don't have to be a 501c3 to be able to apply to our grants. Though we are fiscal sponsors, so our fiscal sponsor does require for them to be 501c3. So we work with folks to be able to make sure that they receive grants. Nonprofit complex, right? All of our funding is unrestricted, focus on people that are less, have less access to funding. And these are people that are doing systems change work in all the ways that is defined. Our application is absolutely short, 7 to 9 questions. None of those things that you can list off in your mind that is like budgets, exhibit A, blah, blah, all of that. None of that. We're super upfront about the information. We tell people, all right, this is what we're going to ask you. This is how you're going to be scored. We make sure that the application process is accessible, written or video submission, English and Spanish, and our application stays open for a fairly long time so that people have time to do what they need to do. We also offer a lot of support to our community. We have in-person, virtual, and bilingual info sessions. And because we are not the people that make decisions, we're able to help people submit the best application that they can submit, because still needs to be written so that there is that, the decision making that the community needs to make. So people power. Our community is the one that makes decisions on behalf of us because they're the ones closest to the issues. I'm not going to get tired of saying that. You've heard it. I'm going to keep saying it because that is the reality. A snapshot of what our decision making process is. We do onboarding. We find the activists, we find the community members, or they come to us, or they get recommended from community organizing groups. And what we do is we onboard them virtually, make sure that we're not wasting people's times. We give people logistics about the environment that we're creating for them to make decisions, everything from our funding priorities. We also have funding priorities. We want to make sure that people are not just addressing symptoms of the issue. We want them to address the roots of the issues, right? So that is what we look forward to. We make sure that they know our policies that are meant to protect the communities that are applying. We let people individually review applications using technology, and we're there to support them, make sure that they're available. We have office hours for people that are not very good with computers, but our process is online, so we make sure that it's accessible. And then we have 2 retreats where we provide folks the environment that they need to make the decisions that they need to make. Usually they're on the weekends. They're usually 5 hours long. Full meals are always needed. So please, full meals are always needed in any type of event that is set up by a philanthropic organization. I'm not gonna go into depths on the steps that we do in each one of the retreats, but the main things that you need to know is that we pay people, these decision makers, we pay people to make that review. Even if it's going to help the community, their time it should not go for free. So we pay people right now $750 per grant cycle. We hire an independent facilitator for them so that we're not there seeing what is it that they're doing, or being part of that process. We are on site because we're making sure that people have the environment that they need. They have the food, they have access to technology, everything that they need. That is our role. Just create the environment, the best environment that they need to make sure that they're making the decision. Last 2 things that I'll say is that if you want to take a picture of that screenshot or get that QR code, those are some of the grantees that are in EJ that we have funded throughout the years. You can meet all of our grantees as well. And I'll just say that the relationship doesn't end there for our grantees. We make sure that we tell people why is it that they didn't get a grant. If they got a grant, we make sure that the disbursement process is easy and accessible to folks. We make sure that we support them throughout the years. We don't require written reports because we trust the folks doing the work that they do the work. And we make sure that we learn from every single cycle that we put together by connecting with the decision makers and saying what worked, what didn't work. some other folks that do grant making, participatory grant making in DC. And that's it. I hope I did that in less than 10 minutes.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Jennifer. Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you for that overview. I feel like I really want to endorse everything that you said 100%. And the Cynthia Gibson resources too on participatory grant making are really terrific. So also very much endorse those resources. But hi, everyone. My name is Jennifer Lesorgel, and I'm here on behalf of Mosaic. And I'm really excited to share a bit about our work with Mosaic, as well as our participatory grant making processes. So Mosaic is a national initiative that is working to really build the connectivity, alignment, and power for the environmental movement. Knowing that right now we're facing really challenging and complex problems that are requiring more from everyone, from organizations, individuals, advocates, government, to really meet and our climate and environmental challenges and goals. So Mosaic was really created with that premise and that understanding that our movement has a lot of really important strengths to it. There's the size, there's the expertise, there's the history, and also acknowledging that there's places that there's weaknesses across the movement too, when it comes to unhelpful competition for funding, for example, or arduous application processes, difficulties accessing funds. And it presents an opportunity for us to address those in order to support the connectivity and alignment of a full movement. And so that's really been the focus of our work. Mosaic in its genesis was created through a design process that interacted and engaged with and interviewed and consulted and worked with over 100 movement leaders across the environmental space, across the entire country over an 18-month-long process to really cultivate that expertise in terms of what would Mosaic look like and how can it really support and complement what's happening in the field and in the moment, not duplicate unnecessarily, and also add an added value to folks who are in the work on a daily basis. And it also really was embedded in social science research. We worked with different movement academics to really understand how other movements have really been able to accelerate and leverage opportunities and really bolster the momentum that goes into population level change. And so we work with folks like Dr. Hari Han, who's up at the Agora Institute at Johns Hopkins, to name a person to really embed both of our work in like the lived and reality of working on organizing work and movement change work, and also what the social science says as well. And a part of our model, we are led by a group of 16 governance assembly members this model came from that design process with the understanding and what you're saying that those who are involved in the work on a day-to-day basis should also really be driving the decisions when it comes to both Mosaic strategy when we develop open RFP processes, all the way to rolling up the sleeves and reading the grant applications and making those selections on an annual basis. So we have a 16-member governance team who represent different elements of the environmental field, from bigger NGOs, including Earth Justice, the National Wildlife Federation, to those really place-based organizations like Push Buffalo and the Savannah Riverkeeper, as well as some funder partners who all come together to read, review, and make grant selections, and also really design Mosaic's strategy when it goes to soliciting for grants as well. And so I think this belief too is really embedded in the idea that a cross-issue whole field power building effort is really needed in the environmental space, and how do we support that coordination and conversation across those different elements, and that is really necessary to our ability to accelerate a lot of the programming that's really working and fill in gaps where there's needed funds. So that's just a little bit about Mosaic, and happy to share more too and connect with anyone who'd like to talk talk a bit about our work, but I thought I could share a little bit as well about how we do our grant making. We run participatory grant making processes. We launch an annual open call. And since Mosaic started in 2020, we've done 3 open RFPs really around this idea of movement infrastructure. What are the resources, relationships, that connective tissue that helps movements really thrive? And how can we make those targeted investments that can support that connectivity, the access to data and information, the communication skills that really equip the right messages and messengers to go out there and do their work, and really taking that like holistic field view. And so some of the reasons why we do an open call, we really want to have an accessible and open process that anyone can apply to. So we really try to reduce our barrier to access by doing open calls, really working to simplify our RFP as well, keeping it short and accessible, knowing that folks have lots of priorities and we want this to be something that is supportive of the work they're doing and not just an added task. And so we also do webinars, which we see as an opportunity as well to support that connection opportunity for folks. We are bringing together folks who are working on health and justice issues in the Mid-Atlantic, all the way to folks who are working on water issues in the West, and having that sort of synergy of partners that you might not have run into if you're doing really place-based work in one space has been a real benefit, and new partnerships arising from that. And that's a goal we have that we also continue with grantees once the process is complete. Then our second phase too is in doing these big open RFP calls over the last 3 years and 3 RFPs, we've received just north of 1,600 applications from all corners of the environmental field. And that's just a huge, set of information. Number one, an extremely humbling experience for our governance assembly too, to just see the level of need and validation that movement infrastructure is really needed and really critical, and that Mosaic can really offer that support for folks. And so we use that data also to get a sense of where are the priorities that we're hearing from folks who are applying. Like, are there opportunities that we can use to surface and really craft an understanding and an image of the landscape of the moment and of the field right now? And so it's a combination of that data that we can solicit from having open calls with tailored or like connected with the social science, and then bringing in the expertise from our governance team. One of our governance assembly members was here. Jackie Patterson, the founder and executive director of the Chisholm Legacy Project, was here earlier talking about her work there. But bringing all those folks together really provides that perspective as well, and who are in those conversations with different actors across the space. And the third, bringing those all together, we do a deep in-person, this past year, for example, we had a 3-day long convening where we bring in those decision makers to read and review projects, really grapple with the data and understanding about where could we leverage this current grant cycle, and they identify and make the grant making decisions, supported by a small staff team who then go out and move the funds to projects. And so that's a bit about our process and how we do our work. There's lots more there, and happy again to chat in a bit more detail. But really, I think seeing the benefits both in just the development of Mosaic by engaging and participating and creating, our intent of a supportive and collaborative organization, through the process itself, really leaning on our experts who are in the work on a day-to-day basis in that collaborative space to make grant making decisions. And then when we work with our grant making partners too, how can we be together in partnership and do a lot of that learning and coming back and like improving processes and really soliciting feedback in the ways that we can. So really excited to learn more too about the Diversity Fund and the new fund as well, and excited to share more. So have a one-pager as well if anyone would like more info about Mosaic. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Before we jump on to you, Casey, I just wanted to ask a quick follow-up question for the two of you. I'm curious, both of you run funds that are you have to fundraise for. what have been some of the greatest challenges in that effort and in terms of engaging with traditional philanthropy, and sort of how have you overcome them?
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely. So fundraising has been something that we have been very thoughtful of whenever we go out and find this money that we need to redistribute to the community. I think I'm in a room where if I say there is some expensive money out there, you know what that means, right? It means that it's full of like strings attached, like different things that we need to do. And when in our history, we have had said no to tens of thousands of dollars because we know that it was going to put strings attached to our grantees. And that's something that we did not want the grant making team to have to grapple with, and our community, our grantees, that, these are emerging groups that are trying to figure out how to do what they need to do, how to step in when the government is not going to step in. With this very rich government is not going to step in and solve issues. So expensive money, like having policies around who we take money from and who we don't, that has been a challenge because, we all have different definitions of what money is. We know that philanthropy exists because there has been an extraction of funding from Black and Brown communities. That's where the money is, and is kept in these large family foundations, this large community, like institutions, and in the government. That's just extraction that was taken from our communities, and it should be returned back. So some folks see getting money from different groups as reparations, as a form of reparations. Some groups say, no, they're actively doing harm in the communities. So that finding folks that align in that spectrum of, traditional philanthropy that understands that they're doing harm but don't really care, to the philanthropic organizations that know that they're doing harm but don't really know what to do with that, and the organizations that actually get that they're causing harm and they need to do something about it and are trying to do things about it. Like the spectrum of how to choose and where to choose who to partner with, that's it's a challenge, because our goal is to protect our grantees, to protect our grant making team members, not having to put them in positions where they need to make decisions about how the funding is going to be delivered, and the barriers that we may have to transfer over to the grantees. So we do not want any barriers for our grant making team. We do not want any barriers for our change makers that are doing the work day in, day out, often underpay, often not pay at all. So that's one of the biggest challenge.
Yeah, I think as an intermediary funding organization, we're definitely not immune to similar challenges that I think a lot of nonprofits or any organization applying for funding go. One that comes to mind is if there's shifts in focus across strategy. Sometimes that's a challenge to some work that is we're looking at, like decadal scale work when it comes to movement building and sustained power building. It's not a single campaign, but it's really about long-term investment in building the leadership pathways to support folks, the sorts of infrastructure that don't happen in an election cycle. So I think that it can feel for some not as in this moment, but I think our argument is that it truly is. It's so responsive to the near-term capacity needs that we hear are so fundamental for doing any sort of work. And also it's really building that long-term infrastructure to support the next opportunity that arises, that next campaign that arises. But sometimes, the moment it doesn't always reflect that with other funding partners. And I think that there's sometimes a perception too that participatory grant making is arduous or like slow or isn't as strategic or results driven, but I really would counter that with the results that we're seeing and the type of impact that we hear from our grantee partners and also the participants of our governance body, that it is really such a enriching, and the results speak for themselves, and how folks are able to have the flexibility to coordinate, to build that resilience and optionality within their organizations and across their partnerships, and be responsive to, in a time where climate disaster is striking and you don't know when, being able to call upon your partners and shift resources and connect and through strong relationships is just so vital to all, the goals of many of our funding partners as well. But I think, there's still challenges in that regard.
Thank you. We have some other questions that kind of get us all stirring in discussion, but I'll hand it over to Casey Wetzel with the Chesapeake Bay Trust. Casey actually has been working with many folks who are at this conference and with Siege to help establish a Mid-Atlantic Environmental Justice Fund. And I'll let Casey kind of run with it from there.
Hi, everyone. So I think I'll be brief about who I'm with, the Chesapeake Bay Trust, but I think it's important for you to know who we are because I think it's relevant to your understanding of why we're in the position that we're in now. So I've worked at the trust, the Chesapeake Bay Trust, for 15 years. It was created in the 80s by the Maryland State Legislature. We are a quasi-state agency. We're also a nonprofit, right? And we function a lot like an intermediary funder. I like that phrase. We sometimes call ourselves a pseudo community foundation. And we distribute funding of our own through the sale of the license plate with the crab and so that money comes through the Motor Vehicle Administration to us, and we regrant it to the public. And that is the money that we have the most flexibility with because it's not a federal source of funding, right? But we manage a lot of federal funding and state funding and also local government funding. And then we also partner with a lot of private family foundations through the Funders Network. And we specialize in creating pooled funds. And what we do is we zip together private and public dollars intentionally to resource people on the ground, empower people on the ground to do local work to address community and environmental health issues. And we zip together those dollars intentionally because, as folks in this room know, federal and state dollars often come with a lot of red tape. And so with that in mind, we're very keen to understand more about participatory funds. I will say, I just want to be very clear about the way the trust has been doing our grant making for a long time. We do external technical reviews. We're modeled after the National Science Foundation. So I don't make decisions about grants over $10,000. Small mini grants that we do, our staff does make quick decisions for people to turn around funding within 8 weeks. But traditionally, we establish technical review committees made up of community members, as well as experts in the field of whatever particular topic we're fielding funding for. And that has been our staff's decision about who sits on those review committees. I will talk about how some of our processes are going to change as it relates to this new participatory fund. I thought I would be sitting here today saying, we hope we'll be establishing a participatory fund, but for some of you, you may be aware that we found out earlier today that we've been awarded $20 million from the USDA to establish the first participatory fund in the Mid-Atlantic focused on environmental justice. And it's one of several proposals that I'm going to point to Paul over here, who's been helping tremendously to help with the proposals we've been submitting. And so I want to appreciate Paul. He's done a lot of back channel work, coordinating a bunch of people. And Dr. Wilson and a bunch of folks that are here at this conference, as Jamie said, are the reason that award was given to the trust. The trust wasn't necessarily picked. There's lots of groups that do grant making, right? I think we were picked because of the power of the partnership and the authenticity of the environmental justice partners doing this work. And so it's a win for the environmental justice community. We're hoping to receive other funding. We have many proposals out there at this point, but this one is from the USDA and it's focused on community forestry in environmental justice communities. So what is a participatory fund? We've heard about that already, but how will the trust sort of shift its model towards participatory grant making? So we have been engaging community members and technical folks in the field to help us score proposals for a very long time. We were not paying them for that. It was a voluntary process. We'll begin paying people to sit on those committees. We have started to do that over the last few years, to be clear, but like we'll be doing that in a more intentional way. The folks in the partnership, all the Environmental Justice Hub partners and the folks that sit at Ceding and at National Wildlife Federation, who are it's the group that received the Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Center. I don't know if any of you went to several of those sessions that have been happening around the Tic-Tac, but I can talk about the Tic-Tac momentarily too. They will help to decide who sits on the review committee. So my staff will no longer do that. So right there, we're ceding the decision-making power of who even sits on the review committees from the start. We'll be resourcing them for their time. I'm very intrigued about the retreat idea. It sounds just way more fun than what we do, which is usually just a meeting, a very long meeting. So maybe something more. I'd like to talk more about that. I've learned a lot just listening just now. And then those decisions will be distributed, but we'll have a period of time where those recommendations we'll have a scoring process, a meeting to discuss the proposals, and then recommendations that will go to the trust board. But we've informed our board, whereas traditionally our board has the final approval or decline process. Now they're aware that the decision-making process is in the hands of the review committee, and we'll be making them aware of those decisions. A representative that already sits on our board, Vernice Miller-Travis, who's a mother of environmental justice, will be co-presenting along with leads of the environmental justice hubs, will come to our board meeting. This is something we've never done before, to present the docket of awards. Typically, folks from outside our organization has never attended our board meetings. So those are some of the things we've already established as shifts in the model. And we're really excited about the prospect of gaining more funding from EPA and NOAA to zip together into the Mid-Atlantic Environmental Justice Fund. But just to your point earlier, who knows what's going to happen? But we have a number of proposals out there trying to move them into a participatory model as opposed to a model that is not empowering the people on the ground who should be making these decisions about who gets funding. So that's the gist of the model. I should be clear about who the hub partners are, just so that I name them in case any of you haven't made it to one of their many sessions here. So they're in DC, it's Empower DC is the Environmental Justice Hub partner. In Pennsylvania, it's the Overbrook Center. In the Maryland area, there's two. There's the South Baltimore area, which is the South Baltimore Community Land Trust. And on the shore, it's the Sentinels for Eastern Shore Health. Let's see. Oh, who am I missing, Paul? Oh my goodness. I'm missing people. I said, I was talking Maria Payan and Michael Payan's group. I said Sentinels for East, but the other, Shen and East. I'm sorry about that. And then, no, but I'm missing someone else. There's someone else I'm missing. It's our HBCU partners. So for the one that we were just awarded, we had for USDA, we also have a partnership with Howard University. And with some of our other proposals, we have other HBCU partners in the mix. And then Ceding, of course, is a partner as well, and National Wildlife Federation. And we're hoping to establish a Virginia partner, and as well as potentially a joint partnership with representatives in West Virginia. And so those groups will be resourced directly in this model to serve as, not only serve on this planning committee on what the public application will look like. So they'll help to develop the RFP, also something we've not done in the past. We write the RFPs. Now we will be having a discussion with a body of people who help to write this public application. We will be there to make sure that we're dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's for the federal government. But we will be integrating all ideas that we can from the committee. Do you have a question?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, actually, I guess I have like 2 questions.
2 questions, let's do it.
Wait for the microphone.
Okay.
Sorry. Hi, I'm Kyle from, well, I guess I'm here representing the Maryland League of Conservation Voters.
Hi, Kyle.
And okay, so first off, I wanted to ask, so your model for the inclusive grant making sounds great, but I'm wondering, like, how are you like doing anything to like push this to become like the default model? Like, are you?
For our organization or generally? Can you just clarify your question?
I mean, your organization, so that's like the default model for your organization. I get that, but like there are many other organizations out there who are like, you know, doing the traditional uninclusive grant making. So what are you doing to like promote yours and try to make it like the default
Well,
model?
yes, that's a great question. And I actually might ask Jamie to help a little bit with the answer to the question. However, I do want to be honest, though, that this is not the default model for my organization. And I have some work to do we run 30 plus grant programs a year for a variety of different things. And this is our first, I think, real participatory fund. We've had elements where we've engaged people in the process, but not from the beginning to the end. And I don't think in the best ways we could have been doing it. I think that I have work to do to prove that this model is the way that my organization should shift all their work. It's just amazing that I'm like sitting up here saying that. But anyway, and then more broadly to your point about how to shift philanthropy, private philanthropy, you know, because we have so much contact with all these other groups that pool their resources with us, I think that I would start there by saying we're going to try to shift them, the folks that pool their dollars with us. But one of the things that I because of time constraints, I didn't talk a lot about the history of CBFN's work and the work we've done to prove a desire for participatory funds in the region. So I think I'll pass it to Jamie to answer a little bit more about that part of your question, because I think there's a lot to do there too. That was my most, so, okay, yeah.
I'll just say that there is a large community of participatory grant making globally, and it's something that it's starting, it's beginning. I talked about the spectrum of foundations, community foundations that know what they're doing and don't want to change, know that they need to change, but don't know how, and organizations like the ones that are here that I absolutely know that things need to change and are trying to figure that out and are starting with the steps that they can start. That's one way in which it begins. Like, this conversation alone is an initial step. I'm someone who doesn't, it's absolutely transparent that the way that I am, the opinions that I have about philanthropy. I don't like being in philanthropy, but I am in philanthropy because folks that are doing the work need to be funded. They need to stop getting funded. And they brought me here. They know what I'm going to say, and they still brought me here. So, like, kudos to them for doing that, right? Because that is a step. They're showing you transparently what could be, but they're telling you this is where we're starting. And that's a huge step. And most philanthropic organizations don't do that. Like, most groups like them don't do that. And they're doing that. So that's already a huge step. Them doing it, them starting to say, like, this is how we do it and this is how we're doing it, that's huge, because where is another quasi governmental organization doing this type of work? That's another evidence that we're working in the correct place, or the correct side of philanthropy, right? But yes, it should absolutely happen a lot faster. One of my goals is to make sure that people, like, philanthropy in DC or globally, however it is, stops functioning the traditional way. And we're going to figure out how to organize philanthropy so that they release those funds.
Thank you. I also wanted to ask, like, so I know you're mainly focused on doing work within DC, but I was also wondering if there's like anything you're doing in Baltimore, perhaps, because that's another neighborhood with like a big Black population that with all sorts of grassroots environmental organizations. And I've been interacting with people from a lot of them recently. And, they're doing all sorts of things that, I mean, they could really use the type of funding that you're talking about. So are you what kind of focus do you have in Baltimore? What kind of initiatives do you have there?
So the trusts, yeah, thank you for these questions. I appreciate them. Our grant making tracks with population, and I would say if you look at, we have a map on our website. The actually majority of our funding goes into Baltimore. There's a higher demand for the funds there, and we've funded a number of groups there that help us to also so much like we will fund the hubs to identify new applicants that we don't have currently a connection with. We have already been doing that at small scales within Baltimore City, but the bulk of our resources across all 30 of our programs, well, that's not fair. Some of our programs are specifically for Prince George's County, right? Or specifically for an area in Pennsylvania, because we fund all across the watershed, but the bulk of the trust's resources track with population, which means Baltimore City is one of their biggest funding areas. And I would love to talk to you more about the groups you're thinking about and whether or not we're funding them or not, because we may be. But I'd like to talk. Yeah.
Could I just tell the gentleman that the organization to communicate with in Baltimore is the South Baltimore Community Land Trust, and the director is Shoshanda Campbell. And being a hub partner on the match grant and the EPA Tic Tac grant, one of the primary responsibilities of her organization is to precisely reach out to those organizations in South Baltimore. And heavens knows, we know that there is so much environmental injustice going on in Baltimore. But one of her responsibilities is to reach out to make sure that whatever those organizations are that are under-resourced, that are unknown, underdeveloped, but very effective and very composed of very passionate people, know about these funding opportunities. And she's going to be presenting, and I encourage you to attend the sessions that Shoshanda is going to be attending. But the other thing I wanted to say is that I worked in academic grant writing in Texas for more than 15 years. And what you are talking about here is so far outside of the box that the box may never catch up to what we're doing. And when we worked on when Casey worked with the National Wildlife Federation and Ceding on the EPA $50 million Grant Makers Award, we were all outside the box, because most of those funds, 80% was it, has to go to community-based organizations. It can't go to the National Wildlife Federation. It can't go to the University of Maryland. It can't go to the Chesapeake Bay Trust. And so that is, to me, that's historic, and we need to keep our, we need to really be aware of that and to understand that it's really a new world. And all of us who had extensive experience with traditional grant proposal writing, we were many times speechless or idealists about where to go. And if it hadn't been for Casey, who was a grant maker, who has been a grant maker for the last time, who could mentor us in what to put into the proposal, we would really be lost. But this is really a new day, and that's why I encourage you to be aware of what's going on the various websites. I mean, for the EPA to put out an RFP that says, okay, here's a huge chunk of money. Here's $50 million, but you have to give 80% of it away. That is amazing, And so, like Casey, I have enjoyed the presentations of the other two presenters who are who are outside the box before we were forced to get outside the box. So I think that we can definitely learn from your experience outside the box, because that's what we are all outside our comfort zone. And receiving grants that we have to give away to other people. How do we do that? And so that's really the challenge. But it's an exciting challenge to be living. And if I were explaining any of this to the people in Texas, they would think I was speaking a foreign language.
Yeah, thank you for those great questions and certainly that comment, Paul. I think it sets the stage, and I think we'll just jump. We already have jumped right into Q&A.
Yeah, I was going to say there's a question.
But do any of the panelists want to respond to any of those questions or comments more?
Yeah. I'll be really, really quick on one of Kyle's questions just about engaging the broader philanthropic space when it comes to things like participatory grant making in some of the ways. We've been doing it too, or thinking about it like actively when it comes to our own work. And I think number one, I agree with you, like showing up in spaces like this and talking about the model is really important. And I think too, just existing and modeling it for other philanthropic efforts or folks who are interested in this type of grant making. And one of our areas of infrastructure that we heard a lot about during Mosaic's design process was philanthropic innovation. How can we change the way that, we're moving funds, and can we invest in certain projects too that are thinking really outside the box about what it means to do that. So some of our grantee partners are also thinking about common applications or different ways that we can move resources. And in our most recent grant making cycle, we've also intentionally worked on collaborating and partnering with other intermediary organizations or funding organizations as well. So we were able to leverage our grant cycle from $6 million to movement infrastructure projects this past year to $10 million in movement infrastructure projects by coordinating intentionally and seeing where can we fill and meet the need beyond what Mosaic can do. So I think that it's a very active and interesting conversation to have, and lots of ways to go about it. So
I think we had a question on my way back. I'll just add my 2 cents, which is I think we also should emphasize the value of an intermediary between traditional philanthropy and getting the money out where it needs to go best, because there are definitely philanthropic institutions that may have good intentions on shifting their grant making, but ultimately you really wouldn't want them to have their finger on the scale. In the sense that there's going to be some level of bias or some level of barriers that are just unavoidable. And an intermediary can be set up in such a way to really get you away from that and then be resourced in order for them to carry out the work the way in which we've heard it described. So it's not a all or nothing sort of scenario. But go ahead.
Hi, my name's Francesca. I'm not with anyone. Actually, I'm just a freshman, like undergrad at UMD. And I was just wondering, specifically for the Miss Who's with the DC Fund, I know that we're like in an environmental justice seminar, and I wanted to know what specifically the DC Fund does for environmental justice, because I know you guys are associated with like stopping like oppression in communities and in that aspect, like what environmentally like associated with environmental laws would you say you guys like have grantees do, or you yourself do?
No, so what our goal is like our current and long-term goal is to make sure that we are supporting the emerging work that is taking place in Washington, D.C. advocacy, because we are in this social contract where we live in a society. Whether it is a city, a state, whatever it is, we elect our elected officials, we pay taxes, and we have fiscal budgets that are large, and we still see issues in the community, right? So what our main goal is to make sure whether it's racial injustice at all the intersections there are, economic justice, environmental justice, all of the injustices that there are, we make sure that the folks that need to be at the table have the funding that they need to do that. This may look in many different ways. Building community power is one of them, and building community power is not just you coming to a community and say, hey, let's get together, let's do what we need to do. When people are being affected by issues, what needs to take place is solving people's issues at the root. Not at the root, at the immediate issues that they're experiencing. It could be I don't know, like, this is not environmental justice, but just to give an example, mutual aid is absolutely important to build community power. So we see our community leaders that are doing this work, making sure that the people that are being affected by the issues have the basic necessities and understand what are the systemic issues that is affecting them. If people cannot get access to fresh food, they need access immediately to fresh food. So they may get, whatever it is that they need from the community leaders that are being funded. Then these community leaders are saying, hey, like, this absolutely has a solution. We have 13 elected officials. We have a mayor. We have a $19.7 billion. There needs to be something here at the administrative level or the legal level that we can do to make sure that this doesn't happen again. So like that, building community power, making sure that people understand that social contract in which we're in and that we do have the power to be able to solve issues is one of them. We have several grantees that we are funding, like, for example, Sovereignty Earthworks. What they're doing is they are building green spaces around public housing. And what they're doing is making sure that people understand that we actually deserve to have green spaces around us. We deserve to have access to fresh food right there in our front, on our backyards, even if it's a public housing that you live in. And they give them the opportunity, they give the community the opportunity to not only be part of that project, but also lead that project. So it's small, tiny little examples like this that are gonna basically blossom into more. We have been the very first grant for many groups that have done amazing work. Empower DC was one of the first grants that we gave out. They were very, very small, and you just heard them. They're about to be one of the central groups in DC that are leading this type of work. So we have been the very first grant for many groups that are doing all sorts of things. And what we hear from our grantees is that could have not happened without us starting with that $5,000 to prove a concept, or that $15,000 in a coalition, or that recommendation that we give to another funder that has a lot more money. And just like that, that is our goal, to make sure that the people that are doing the advocacy are doing the advocacy. So us ourselves, while we're not at the Wilson Building, that's where legislation gets done. We're not at the Wilson Building knocking on doors or visiting council members or the mayor. We are making sure that the people that should be at the front, they're not paying out of pocket, or they're not doing that work for free. That is our work, and that is what we're ready to continue doing until the systemic issues that are affecting communities get resolved at the root. Not, at the surface level, but at the root. I hope that was helpful.
I know I'll try to be quick because I know we're coming up on time. I'm Rachel Marston. I'm with the Environmental Defense Fund, but I'm really here representing the Frontline Resource Institute, which is a very fledgling intermediary, kind of sponsored, I guess, by EDF is the best way to put it. And one of the big things I've been thinking about is there are so many kind of new intermediaries that are thinking about participatory grant making and kind of coming up in the space. And it can be really hard to find out what other people are doing and seeing who's doing what in this space. And we touched a little bit on this, particularly you, Jennifer, but how can we better collaborate and make sure that we're adequately addressing the resource gaps without kind of duplicating work, or duplicating work strategically, maybe, and without kind of working without looking at what others are doing and working in solidarity with each other. And that can be anyone's question, everyone's question.
Yeah, I can start and definitely open it. Yeah, I mean, I think the coordination aspect is so important. And I think for us, that's something we're increasingly doing more and more of as we think about Mosaic as not only hoping to support and bolster that connectivity across the movement and movement organizations, but how do we also do that when it comes to other intermediary organizations and, across philanthropy overall? And I think that's something I hear at all levels when I talk with folks who are working on, very place-based grassroots work, like how do you know who's around and how do we connect together? And so that's part of the reason our grants also are really about creating that spaciousness too, the opportunity to develop those relationships so that you can call upon one another and resource those collaboration efforts. And so all of our grants have collaboration as a part of what they do, and that's something that our governance assembly particularly emphasizes when they're reading and reviewing grants. Like, how can this be not just for a single organization, but really about that connection across the movement? And so I think that's a space we're wanting to do more and more of, knowing that it's a call for all of us. And I know Free would be happy to connect with you afterwards too. I know I've connected with Margot before, so I think we're in a right time for us to be thinking about how can we coordinate. And I gave the example about how Mosaic's done it, but a little bit, and that's a place we want to, I think, continue to do more.
Yeah, I can say something. And I know I talk a lot, but Spanish has 30% more words, so that's 30% that I go over. So I'll be quick. One logistical is for coalitions, there's got to be money to make sure that there is infrastructure for the coalitions to function, like a consultant or someone who can keep us going. Because if you and I'm new to philanthropy, like holding a title in philanthropy, but I've been around tables where people talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, and then where's the plan? Like, what is it that we're gonna do? How's the work gonna move forward, right? So making sure there is the infrastructure for the work to take place, that's important. Like, we need someone that doesn't have a job and then has this other job now to do. It's absolutely important so that we can keep center and focus. The other one that I have not noticed yet, but it's something that I, in the side of how do we get to participatory grant making, is asking, not being afraid to ask the groups, the funders that are around or the organizations that are around, to look inside and saying, what are we doing to add to this issue, to be a barrier to this issue, not to solve the issue, but how are we a barrier to this issue? That's something that I ask my funder partners all the time, is we can talk all day. I was in a meeting 2 days ago about housing justice, and they were like, oh yeah, and that issue, and that issue, and that issue. And I'm like, yeah, these conversations are exactly what our grantees are talking about, and they have they don't have much money. They have to come to us every single year to ask for money, and you feel it. It's absolutely overwhelming to have these conversations. We can have conversations all day about these issues, and we have. I mean, our bank account is not that large, but there are people with $70 million in their endowment, and to them still feels overwhelming. So what are we doing as funders? That's something that we gotta ask to the organization or to our funders. What are we doing as funders to add to be a barrier, to add barriers to this issue, and how do we remove them ourselves? That's something that we need to do. Look inside to make sure that you're not adding to the issue. That's number one, before you start talking about how do we solve the issue, right?
I just want to say one thing, because the barrier thing that you've mentioned several times is something that is really on my mind because of the federal dollar thing. So not only am I really excited to be here with you guys today to just hear the lessons that you've learned. I've learned so much just in the last hour, but to think, to your point, to be in other rooms, how can we create rooms where people that are trying to stand up participatory funds with or without federal funds are learning from each other? I think that potentially funders networks can play a role in that, but I'm really interested in that too, because I think that we can only be as creative as the minds in the room, and I think there's a lot of potential opportunity that I would to learn from each other as we try to break down barriers, particularly related to federal funds. And I have to say, I've sat on a lot of panels where people will say, oh, well, why do you require the quality assurance project plan, the QAP, right? It's a federal requirement. I don't want to be requiring the co-op. It's a real pain. But I also don't feel a lot of agents. I don't really even know who I would talk to about why that's such a burden, you know? But maybe if there was a table where we could build power of the people that are trying to get these dollars on the ground to say, hey, listen, the co-op sucks. We don't want to do the co-op, right? And to build to go with that power to the people that are requiring those things to try and influence change would be wonderful, right? But I don't feel individually that I know who I would know. And I'm also part of a non-advocacy organization, just to be clear, right? But that's just one example of a lot of examples that are going to be coming up nationally, I think, with all this money that are going to be challenges, right? And we have to figure out how to build power to try and break down those barriers. Yeah.
I think we are at time. So I just want to really give a big round of applause to our panelists. Thank you all for being here, in particular for being here in person, IRL. I think it's just great to be in community and with everyone. And I hope that those who were tuning in online were able to listen in and follow the conversation. We're glad you were with us as well. It's a moment. There's no question. This is a moment, and particularly a moment in the environmental justice community, with the amount of resources flowing, as Dr. Kavanaugh mentioned, intentionally to get into the hands of the communities who have historically not actually ever seen these resources show up for them. I think what is testing the whole system is, how do you do that in a way that centers people, that centers the frontline communities, and that ensures that the decision-making follows suit. And I think we heard some great examples of how that can be done. And I know that we have a lot of people committed to figuring out how to do that moving forward. So thank you all again. And I think I'm supposed to remind people that at 5 o'clock, the closing plenary is in the main grand ballroom right downstairs underneath of us. And so meet there for that session. And otherwise, thank you all for coming.